So box.
Hi, my name is Rochelle, and you're watching or listening to Box F1 Pod. Welcome to the Austin Grand Prix episode. What a weekend. I can't fully say like what a race, because like it wasn't a bad race per se, it just wasn't like a great race per se. I do love COTA. It's a great track. We can overtake, which it's America. Of course we can overtake. Things are big, but it's definitely one of my favorite American tracks. Yes, hi. It's one of my favorite American tracks. Well, it's my only favorite American track. I don't like any of the other ones, but as you can see, I don't like it enough to cook anything because I don't know what to cook for America. So instead, I'm just drinking. It's ranch water for Texas, because I saw Glenn Powell was there and he said he loves ranch water, so I made one with grapefruit. So we're going to be talking about all things Austin Grand Prix. Yes, the racing wasn't like thrilling, but it was still a really dramatic weekend in the sense of the championship, in the sense of what the fuck's going on at McLaren. I feel like this is in my introduction every week. Because what the fuck's going on at McLaren? Truly, they make me so mad. We'll get into why they're making me mad this week. But I just don't know what they're doing over there. We're gonna talk about Max suddenly becoming a fave. People who I know hate Max are suddenly like, should Max win the championship? Wouldn't that be crazy? Except we've been saying, wouldn't that be crazy since the summer break ended? But like now we're like, isn't that crazy anymore? He's really shaved down that like difference. I think it was 104. He came into the summer break 104 points off from the lead. He was literally written off. And then we were like, goody. And now he's 40 points away from the lead. So he could. Will he? I don't know. As Max Verstappen says, there's a 50-50 chance. So with that, let's kick things off with the digital warm-up. Lap one, off track F1. We're gonna throw in a little bit of F1 news in here just because there's only two things that I want to say for F1 news, and they're kind of boring. So, the first one is that the Circuit of the Americas, COTA, the US Grand Prix, has been extended through 2034. So, yay. Truly, it's the only US Grand Prix that matters. I hate Miami and Vegas, but it's fine. It's fine. Who cares what I think? The other big news is that George has officially been announced as the second driver for Mercedes. As you might know, they have spent quite a bit of time debating his contract. I believe George was trying to fight for a multi-year contract, and Toto was like, well, what about Max Verstappen? That's all alleged. But he probably was like, what about Max Verstappen? And George's like, I just want you to race her. I could see him holding space, except literally holding space for Max Verstappen. However, the likelihood of Max leaving Red Bull slim to none. The benefits of retaining his most consistent, most invested into driver, it's good. I don't know why George was struggling so hard to get what he needs, because he's winning race. He's been like, I think, out of everyone this year, and I don't have any stats in front of me, so like don't quote me on this, but he definitely feels like one of the most consistent drivers throughout the entire season. The McLarens, they've had their ups and downs, even though they've had the strongest car. Max had his highs at the beginning of the season, then he had a lull, and now he's like having another high again. George has consistently just like peeked his head onto the podium throughout the whole season, and I feel, and he's always like in the mix, and he's always able to maximize on bad things happening to other people, whatever it is. Like, he deserves a multi-year contract. He was announced for sure to be for 2026. Whether it is a multi-year contract and they're just presenting it as 2026, whether he was just able to argue more money to accept a 1-year contract, I'm not sure. But after winning in Singapore, and this was announced after Singapore, so that clearly swayed in his direction. And I honestly cannot wait for the Drive to Survive episode that's all about how George was fighting for his contract this entire year, and then he won in Singapore, and then Toto was like, okay, you can have your contract. That's definitely going to be an episode. However, by the way, sorry, I'm going to be all over the place today. However, Toto popped over to Harvard on the way to Austin, and he gave a little speech, and I saw a clip of it. I'm like 90% sure that he definitely went to Harvard, and I saw a clip from a speech that I'm like 90% sure was from his Harvard speech. Now I'm doubting myself, so I'm going to say allegedly. The clip I saw was from his Harvard speech. But it could have been from another speech. But anyway, he was talking about Mercedes' participation in Drive to Survive, and he was like, when DTS first started, the then team principal at Ferrari and him like talked about, like, this is dumb, we're not going to participate. And then he said he was on a plane, and it was on the plane, and he was like, let me watch an episode. And the first episode of the first season was Carlos Sainz competing against Fernando Alonso. And he was like, they're like making this sound like they're competing for first place, but they're competing for like 12th position. And he's like, this is stupid. And he didn't watch anything else. He just watched that episode. He's like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Thank God I didn't participate, and moved on with his life. And then a family friend reached out and was like, hey, can we get tickets to the race for me and my children? And he was like, why are you, like, for sure, but like, why are you suddenly interested in F1? And they were like, just fine. We're obsessed with it. And then he was like, and then dawned on me that because we decided not to participate, the show was able to focus on smaller teams and give them a spotlight they would have probably otherwise not gotten, which seemed like him inadvertently taking credit. But he was like, after that, we decided to participate, and he saw the benefits of it, and he was like, it was a bit short-sighted the way we were looking at it. Which is all true. Like, I know all the drivers, all the teams, team principals, everyone there kind of sees DTS as fiction, which it is in a lot of instances. But what it is good at is it's really good at generating interest and engagement and excitement. Prime example here. So that was just really interesting to hear the thought process behind why it took so long for Mercedes to participate in Drive to Survive. But anyway, George has now, coming back to what we were talking about, George has officially been announced as the 2026 drivers for Mercedes. How long his contract is, I'm not sure. It sounded like it was just for 2026, though that sounds insane to me, but like, Toto really is holding out hope. Do you guys remember in F1 the movie, which I never did that episode, but it's fine. At the end of F1 the movie, there's a clip where the younger driver, I forgot his name, Damson Idris, who plays a younger driver on the team with Brad Pitt, there's a scene where he's walking through the paddock after Abu Dhabi, and Toto stops him and he's like, hey, do you need a drive for next year? And it made me laugh. I saw it twice. So every time I saw it made me laugh, because I'm like, this was literally Toto all year last year trying to get Max, this year trying to get Max. Like, he was actually desperate for a driver. So it was like, he's not actually playing. He probably was stopping people in the middle of the track and going, hey, want a spot? But I think Toto still is holding out hope for Max. And Max could surprise us all. Max loves a little surprise. I just don't see him going to Mercedes. And I truly don't see him being a teammate to George Russell. I know that people are saying he's most likely going to replace Kimi, which in that case, Kimi has a multi-year contract. I don't know why George wasn't given a multi-year contract. And I realized that Mercedes has decided to invest quite thoroughly and aggressively into Kimi. Kimi has not had the best season. However, Kimi also is a rookie at a really good team. And I believe it was Max in an interview who was saying he really needs to be cut some slack because, like, it's hard enough being a rookie, but being a rookie with a good car, that pressure is incomprehensible. And so his mistakes are understandable. The pressure he's under is understandable. His emotional distress, all understandable. But then again, who is Max going to replace then? It's a little confusing. I guess TBD. TBD. Next silly season, I'm going to be 10 out of 10. This silly season was shit because it was all like decided in advance, basically. Another thing that I forgot to mention last time, this was from like last race, but we had talked a little bit about Fernando's radio. He was like 10 out of 10 on the radio last time, but there was one moment where he was battling Isack on the grid. And Isack was dealing with an engine problem on his car, and but he was still like fighting off Fernando. He was still defending against Fernando, and I guess Fernando's a bit annoyed because he thought that Isack has a problem, so why wouldn't he just let him through? And he had some choice words on the radio. I don't remember exactly what they were, but they were not nice. And afterwards, Isack was asked about it, and Isack just went, oh, whatever. He's just a grump, which made me laugh. Isack should never be media trained. None of the rookies should. But anyway, so if you remember last year, George Russell and Max Verstappen had quite an intense beef, which was started by an incident on the track. And then Max commented about it in the press conference, saying that he'd never had another driver go in at him so hard in front of the stewards. And then George came out in the media and said the most egregious shit about Max's character and like called him a bully and said no one will ever stand up to him. And it was like this whole thing. And that interview was originally conducted for Sky Sports with Ted Kravitz. And recently, Ted Kravitz came out like last week and said that George had asked him to ask him about Max, implying that the whole thing was premeditated, which is just hilarious to me. Even if I didn't know that he had asked Ted, the fact that it was premeditated does not surprise me. I can 100% imagine George in front of the mirror practicing that little monologue. It's so George to like approach Ted and be like, hey Ted, ask me about it. On the other hand, I'm going to defend George here. Why the fuck has Ted come out and said that? I find that, I mean, it's not really like off the record, on the record, like whatever. It just feels kind of rude. Like we've all moved past that beef. It's hilarious. This is hilarious intel that we've gotten into this beef. But literally, what is the point? Besides to give people something funny to talk about. Like, does he think he's going to be getting many more like quotes from George by revealing that? Isn't that bad from a journalistic standpoint? From a viewership standpoint, hilarious. Will he get that kind of moment again? Highly doubtful, because I wouldn't trust him. I don't think George is ever going to trust him. Like, he came to him in confidence, be like, hey, I want to say this. Ask me about it. Says it. And Ted Kravitz, by the way, is not a Max Verstappen fan. He does not like Max Verstappen. He can say whatever he wants. He really doesn't like Max Verstappen. He's always coming at Max. He is a big British driver fan. So I really don't see his angle in this. Like, thank you for your service, Ted. Like, I'm so glad we have this information. It's hilarious and amazing intel, but like, you're not really serving your journalistic career with this, revealing this information. But anyway, speaking of insane comments to make in the media, Lando, a couple of weeks ago, again, I'm presuming he was asked and he didn't just volunteer this information. Lando, in theory, spoke to ESPN I haven't seen the actual interview. I don't believe I saw the quote directly from ESPN. However, it's been reported by multiple sources. So I will say all of this is alleged. According to several sources, however, I've not confirmed that it came from Lando himself, he did say, I don't want to say or believe that I will ever be as good as Max because I think that is the wrong thing to tell myself. He's one of the best drivers ever in Formula One. So if anyone ever comes up to you and says, yes, they will be as good as Verstappen, just tell them to fuck off. Any driver in the world can just be confident in saying that kind of thing. But I think it is almost impossible. Do I believe on some days I am better? Yes. Do I believe my teammate on some days is better? Yes. But it is about how good he is at being consistent, which is impressive. He never goes to 101%, but he will always be at 100%. And when he has a bad day, he's at 99%. And this is the part that's a little, and it is hard to beat someone who was born into an F1 seat. If I could go back and choose how to be a better driver, I would also have a mom and dad who were racing drivers. Start when you are a baby in the paddock, start karting at whatever age you did, and do more testing than everyone else. I would be a better driver now if I did all of those things. So people have to catch up because he was made to be in the position he is now. That's a crazy thing to say. He's not like an Esteban or a Lewis whose parents had to work multiple jobs, who did not come from wealth, who was not easily put through all of the karting and the racing and the F2 and F3 and whatever. His dad is one of the richest people in England. He had the means. Also, Lando, it's not karting right now. Lando has had an entire career in F1 to catch up to Max Verstappen. His performance now has nothing to do with the fact that Max met Michael Schumacher when he was 1 year old. We all actually know how hard Max works. I don't think the Nepo baby argument is really applicable to Max. Yes, he definitely had benefits. Yes, he was definitely around driving more. He was definitely around Formula One champions more. He was, but we also know how hard he had it. And we also know he works hard. And we also know he's really fucking talented. Him meeting Michael Schumacher at 2 years old is not actually what made Max a 4-time world champion. Sorry. Almost 5. So that was just like an unnecessary comment, and I think that is also Lando's biggest downfall, is making these literally consistent unnecessary arguments in the media. Like, he does this all the time. He shoots himself in the foot. Like, none of that was necessary. Just focus on driving. But anyway, that was a huge rant. Lando girlies are gonna come for me. All right. If you are familiar with the Chicken Shop series with Amelia Dimoldenberg, love her. It's where she meets celebrities in a chicken shop and has a date with them, and it's a 10-minute, literally 8 to 10 minute series on YouTube. So good. It's one of my favorites. She's one of my favorite little celebs. She has started a new series called Passenger Princess, where so she had Lando on ages ago. And now she started a new series where the Formula One drivers teach her how to drive a car because she doesn't have her license. The first episode dropped last week, and it was with George Russell, and honestly, it was hilarious. It was so good. Her banter with George, I think. So it seems like the driver she has lined up. Did I talk about it 2 weeks ago? I think I did. The driver she has lined up is Oscar, George, Carlos, Ollie. Ollie's in there. I think Ollie's coming out this week. And a few others. And it's just them all teaching her different aspects of driving. And hers with George was so funny. George was able to keep up with her banter. She does not know how to drive. It was just really funny watching. And drivers are already really anxious in the car. And then she's also being very, her personality is a little abrasive. Her style of flirting is just throws people off their guard, and so the combination is just so funny. One of the most interesting things. There was a lot of funny moments. I linked it in the show notes, so I recommend you watch it. But like one of the most interesting moments is she was like, "Can I go now?" And he was like, "Well, you have to start the car first." And she's like, "Oh right, how do I do that?" And then she pushes the button, and she's like, "How does your car start? Do you push a button?" And he was like, "No, I don't." And she's like, "So how does your car start?" And he was like, "Well, someone in the back pushes something." And she was like, "What?" And he was like, "I don't actually know." You watch George in real time, realize he has absolutely no idea how his car turns on. And then Amelia was like, "I feel like you should know that." And you can see his face being like, "Yeah, I probably should know that." It was quite funny. Anyway, moving on to a couple of birthdays. Gabby Bortoleto turned 21. And we talked about last time, Isack recently turned 21, so I really hope they go out in Austin after this race. Kimi was on stage and someone was asking, I think George had asked, where can Kimi go out? And then Kimi was like, "Do I need a fake ID?" And Kimi does need a fake ID to go out in Austin. But then they just announced it in a very public forum, so I'm not sure how successful he's going to be. But the other rookies can go out. Charles turned 28, which was very exciting. One of the Italian interviewers brought him a little cake to Austin, and it was really cute. He had a lot of wholesome interactions with the media this weekend. Someone else was trying to ask him about his road trip with Carlos, but had a very long build up to it. And then they were just yammering, like, "So how was your road trip with Carlos?" He's like, "I had no idea where that question was going," and then launched into the story. And you can tell it's one of his favorite. It was a core memory for him. He definitely had a great time. Oscar Piastri, I found a rare. I mean, I don't follow him on TikTok, so he might do more TikToks more often than this, but he did post a rare TikTok for me, it seems, of him enjoying Austin BBQ with Lily. I saw more than one interview of him talking about barbecue from Austin, so he clearly really likes that brisket. Speaking of brisket, Isack and Liam did Austin charades together. And one of the funniest things, Isack is so funny with how he approaches charades. He reads the card, he looks extremely frustrated, but in French, when I say frustrated in French, you know what I mean, right? You can see the face he's making. And then he does it, but his entire charades is so exasperated. It's quite funny. But his first thing was bull, and they kept cutting to clips of Liam trying to guess the word bull, and it took him literally so long. Isack went like this. He tried everything to emulate a bull. It was very clear he was talking about a bull. Their team is called Racing Bulls. So it was really funny how long it took Liam. But what didn't take Liam long is brisket. Isack literally just cut into brisket. He had just done the first cut, and immediately Liam was like, "Brisket." And then Isack was like, "How did you get this? How you get this?" It was so funny. I fully moved on to the next lap. Lap 3, trackside at Austin. Another thing that happened is that Charles was playing this football game where they, they have a net with different holes in it, and you have to make different holes to score different points. And Charles kept trying to kick the ball into the highest point hole, and he kept missing. And Max was walking by drinking a Red Bull, and the guy who was doing it with Charles was like, "Maybe we can ask Max to help." And Charles was like, "Okay, Max, can you help me?" And Max was like, "Why? What's the problem?" He's like, "I'm just trying to kick the ball into that hole. Do you think you could try?" And Max was like, "Sure, no problem." And he picks up the ball and just puts it in the hole. He's like, "Got it." And then they actually counted the 2 points. It was so funny. And so Max, that was so Max. There was a moment. One of the F1 TV reporters is American. I guess I have an American counterpart. It was really weird. But she might have been from Sky. Anyway, there was an American counterpart who I'd never seen before, who was just walking the track, pulling drivers for chats. And she walked by Max and Kimi talking. They were walking the opposite direction. She's like, "Oh, actually, Kimi, sorry, we're going to pull Max away from you, and we're going to talk to him." And she starts walking with Max, and Kimi looks around. I don't know if you guys remember that clip of them during the driver's parade when Kimi got pulled for an interview, or when Kimi got pulled for an interview while he was talking to Max, and Max literally did a 360-degree turn, looking for where Kimi had been taken to. So Max gets pulled for the interview. Kimi gets left behind. Max turns around to like laugh with Kimi, and Kimi does like a full circle around the whole cameras, comes back around next to Max, they put their arms around each other, and he goes, "You're always separating us." I just like refused to leave, and it was so funny. The woman was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to stay? We could all walk together." Clearly did not know the lore because she's never at all the other races, but it was so fun. Kimi's like, "I will not leave, actually. I will stay. How dare you?" Which I found really funny. Coda made a banner for all the drivers with like, it was like against the wall, and it was like the silhouette of all the drivers, and it had their height there, so it was like measuring all their heights. And Lando, for some reason, was at the end, and it said he was 5'6". And Lando's small, but he's not 5'6" small. I think he's like 5'9". And a bunch of fans posted clips of him being like, "What the fuck? Why is this here?" And then the next clip I saw, it seems like the circuit had put up like a shrub in front of Lando. So like there's this whole like banner of all the drivers, and then just like a giant shrub covering up Lando, and the mistake they made with his height. Like they could have easily just rewritten the number, would have been a little less embarrassing than just covering Lando up entirely with literally a massive shrub. It was literally a giant shrub. It was so funny. Let's talk quickly about the celebrities that were present at COTA. Glenn Powell was there. He did do the grid walk with Brendel. However, Hulu has decided to not let me watch Hulu Live anymore, so I do not have access to ESPN anymore, so I could not watch it. And instead of anyone posting a clip of the actual grid walk, they just posted a clip of the grid walk and put music on top of it because they thought Glenn Powell looked good, and that was entirely unhelpful to me. So I didn't watch it, but it seems like he did the entire grid walk with Brendel, and from what I could tell, it was great, but I have nothing else to report on it because Hulu's out to get me and all the TikTok girlies are out to get me. He was shown very quickly during the national anthem, which he was taking very seriously. He was like standing there like this the whole time, hand over chest. I thought we only did the hand over chest thing during the Pledge of Allegiance, but there were a lot of people there with their hands over their chests, and I didn't realize that's what we did. Chase Crawford was there. The Woodhalls were there. They showed them during the anthem. They also were there during the sprint race. They presented the top three winners with the trophies, which were belt buckles. We went really hard on the Southern theme this year. Anyway, the national anthem was performed by a kid, literally a child, who was dressed in like this mariachi fit, and the bow that they wear here was like F1 with an F1 emblem. And I think he went viral earlier this year. He performed a couple of baseball games, including the Savannah Bananas and like an actual baseball game. I think his name is Mateo Lopez. I'll be honest, I'm entirely indifferent about the US national anthem. I love an anthem. The Dutch national anthem gets me going every time. The only time I'm really that bothered by the US national anthem is like during the Olympics maybe, but usually I don't really care. This kid's rendition of the US national anthem was so good. He was so good. People started cheering in the middle of his anthem. They showed Tara Woodhull in the middle of him, and she was like jamming. She was like, it was like a Beyonce. She was acting. She was at a Beyonce concert. He was so good. Every note was perfect. He's a little kid. He looks like he's like 12. I don't know. So good. Like, I think this was one of my favorite anthems that I've experienced through F1 this year, and I love every other anthem besides her. It was so good. I hope he gets famous, and I hope when his balls drop, it doesn't affect his voice. But before we move on to the analysis, there's one major thing we need to talk about, And that's repercussions. So if you remember, last race in Singapore, I think it was 2 weeks ago, there was the incident with Lando and Oscar when Lando overtook Oscar, ended up hitting Oscar, and I think he tapped someone else, Max. And Oscar got on the radio and was like, my teammate just hit me. And they were like, what do you want us to do about it? And I don't know what the discourse is on the internet. From what I can tell, it's just the Lando fans misinterpreting everyone's frustration with the situation. But I will just speak for myself. My personal frustration with the situation was that in any other instance, it's been made very clear that papaya rules are just don't hit your teammate. Inadvertently, Lando hit his teammate. Does that make Lando's move bad? No. It was a normal thing it was a racing incident, not even an incident because nothing happened. Like Lando got more damage than Oscar. Oscar rightly, I think, felt perturbed and slighted by his team because they didn't even say like, hey Lando, that's not how we race. They didn't even say, hey Oscar, you're right. Like Lando shouldn't have hit you. We'll deal with it out. They didn't make any comments. They acted as if like Lando did not do an aggressive move and hit his teammate. Again, not that Lando's move was bad. We have been saying for the last 2 years that Lando needs to get more aggressive. He got more aggressive. He did a good move. Whatever. It was the precedent that McLaren themselves have set for their drivers. When Oscar accidentally tapped Lando, he was told that's not how we race, don't do it again. And Oscar said, got it. That was not issued here. And I think if that had been issued here, there wouldn't have been as much of a problem. But Oscar definitely felt like stressed because he was slower than Lando. Then he felt let down by his team. Then he had a really slow pit stop, which, by the way, was another whole thing because they asked Lando if he wanted to pit before Oscar, which was weird. It was weird that they asked Lando. I know he's ahead, but like it's still weird that they asked him. All of that aside, my, again, biggest issue with the entire situation, and I think most people's issue with the entire situation, was that they treated this scenario differently. Had they just over the radio reprimanded Lando for tapping his teammate, I feel like none of this would be a problem. However, it caused a lot of discourse for 2 weeks. We've been talking about McLaren, papaya rules. They don't have the same like set of like they're hypocritical, blah 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 blah. And then Lando fans are like, well, if Oscar did this, blah 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 blah, but Lando did it, and everyone's freaking out. They told him to be aggressive. He's aggressive, and now everyone's angry. Well, that's not what people were angry about. I'm exclusively mad at McLaren. Lando did a good aggressive move. He should have done it. It was a good move. There were no repercussions for him. However, it turns out there were repercussions from him because this week in the media, Lando told everyone that he did not get away with his behavior last time in Singapore and that there were repercussions for him, but he will not go into detail about what those repercussions are. And then Oscar was asked about the repercussions and he was like, yes, there are repercussions. Like Lando took responsibility for what he did last time, and there were some consequences discussed within the team, but I will not be revealing what those are. And then Zach Brown was like, yes, there are repercussions, but they're so small you won't even notice them. So there's been like a whole there's been the whole dramatic end of things. They're like, what are they gonna do? Like make Lando sit out races, and then there was like, is Oscar gonna get preferred tire strategy? Is he gonna get to pit stops? Like, what are the repercussions? Like, how is Lando gonna suffer for this? All of this conversation is relevant to what happened during the sprint race, which we'll get to in a second. But once again, McLaren is shooting themselves in the foot. Whether the drivers were told to discuss these repercussions. Whether Lando decided to go out on a limb and like say, I got repercussions, and then like everyone had to follow suit. But the fact that no one was surprised that he said that, or that like that they exist, like I don't know what Lando's repercussions could possibly be. The only thing that should have happened was that he should have gotten reprimanded for hitting his teammate and be like, hey, that's not how we race. And Lando's like, sure, my bad, and then they move on. Like that's all that should. What possible repercussions could they be? Could there be? And if there are repercussions, which maybe like I don't even know what those repercussions could be. Why are they saying in the media? They are not helping their case. Why are they discussing this in the media? It's insanity to me. Like for a team that's so good at marketing and brand and PR, they are fucking shit at this specific thing. And another thing that's come out is one of their other drivers, Alex Palou, who is a Spanish driver who used to be a McLaren driver in IndyCar, was let go by the team. And now they're like in court for some reason. And in court, he said that he was informed by Zach Brown that Oscar was not hired because by Zach Brown's choice. It was not his choice to hire him, and that there was still an option for Alex to join the team. As much as I do not like Zach Brown, I don't think this is a crazy thing because, like, he's obviously always going to be very diplomatic and be like, of course there's always a spot on our team for us. Like, of course this wasn't like my choice. Of course, like, if he's like trying to appease this potential driver, he didn't know how Oscar was going to work out. So that's probably very true. Like, you could have a chance if Oscar sucks. Oscar didn't suck. Oscar is very good. I don't think anyone was expecting, particularly McLaren, for Oscar to be that good. In fact, I imagine McLaren thought Oscar would be a Bottas. Like, good enough, but like Lando was the star, and unfortunately Oscar is not that. Oscar is equal, if not, I don't know who's better, but at least an equal to Lando. However, it can't be nice to hear that your boss didn't want to hire you. So I don't imagine that's making Oscar's mindset and mentality towards his own team any better. Like, I do still think there's something in his head. As cool, calm, and collected as Oscar Piastri is, there is pressure. He's leading the championship. It's like, and he keeps dwindling away how much he's leading this championship. It feels like his team's against him. Like, that will chip away at anyone. And we're starting to see those cracks show. And I don't really blame him. However, we'll need him to rally. And we'll talk a little bit more about Oscar in a second. But that is the end of the digital warm-up. On to the race run. Okay. On to analysis. So let's start things off with the sprint. Jumping straight into the sprint and leading off of the last thing we discussed with McLaren and the repercussions. In turn one of the sprint, it seems that Oscar was trying to overtake Lando. And it seems like they were side by side. I think no one had the lead of the apex, from what I can understand. And then Lando braked hard. We almost brake tested Oscar, from what I understand. Oscar then tried to do the switch back on him without like really thinking that there were 17 other cars on the other side of him. So he ended up getting crashed into by Nico, causing him to go up and into Lando, and they both were out of the race. Repercussions, everyone was like, question mark, are the repercussions? Initially, Zach Brown had said that it was all Nico's fault. And then later he said he reviewed the footage and he couldn't possibly blame Nico for it. Not saying who he was blaming. Lando, when initially interviewed, was asked if he blames Oscar, and he was like, well, why would I blame Oscar? Someone hit him. And then later he was like, someone asked him if, since he's had time to review the footage, does he still think that's what happened? And he just smiled and went, Yep. Implying he doesn't think that. Oscar just said he got hit. I think this week. So I think he said he attempted a switchback and then ended up getting hit by Nico and accidentally ended up hitting Lando. It was a bad move to make, considering everything. There's too many factors here to assign blame to one person. However, people are very quick to assign blame to Oscar. I think if we were going to assign blame to anyone, it would probably be Oscar. However, it was too much of a racing incident. Lando did brake quite harder than Oscar was probably expecting. Oscar did forget that Nico was there. Nico did hit Oscar. So all of these things combined makes it a racing incident. But that's not stopping everyone going like, repercussions. Are they canceled? Are they continuing? Do both get repercussions? What is happening to the repercussions? Once we got to qualifying, Lando qualified second and Oscar qualified sixth. Why has Oscar qualified sixth? Unclear. Like, what is causing Oscar to be that slow besides himself? I don't know what's going on. Fernando did get into trouble a bit with the sprint race. He was also like collateral damage, and he posted a picture of the pileup from the sprint race and captioned it on his story, "My luck is flatlining." And I'm ready for 2026, which made me laugh. Also, Carlos ended up in P3, thanks to the McLaren's crashing out, probably. Although he did qualify very well for sprint, and the cheers he got brought tears to my eyes. Like, it was like deafening across the entire paddock, like stadium, whatever we're calling it. To the point where George and Max were smiling at how hard they were cheering for him, and even Carlos just kept pausing to listen to everyone cheer. It was so nice. I love seeing Carlos thriving like this. Did it all crash and burn once it got to the race? For sure, but it was nice while it lasted, and he's really just getting a lot of great results for Williams in a Williams. It's kind of strange, isn't it? Like, Alex, up until like post-summer break, had a very consistently good season, placing reasonably well for where everyone expected Williams to be. And then Carlos had a terrible first half of the season, and then he had two incredible successes in the second half of the season, but he also was like DNFing and stuff. So like, it's just like slightly more consistent, his success, but like, I'm really hoping it's down to bad luck and like first year in team type deal. But I guess we'll see. Moving on to quali, Isack crashed out in Q1. But after that, we saw some pretty good times set. So the starting grid is as follows. Max, Lando, Charles, George, Lewis, Oscar, Kimi, Ollie, Carlos, Fernando, Nico, Liam, Yuki, Pierre, Franco, Gabby, Ocon, Alex, Lance, and Isack. All right, moving on to the race. So Max had kind of an iffy start, but he ended up rallying and retained first position. Charles, being on soft tires, really, like, okay, every time Charles / Ferrari does something outside of the status quo, my immediate fear is that it's all going to go to shit. It didn't all go to shit. It actually went fine. And in fact, it paid off because right at the start, Charles was able to zoom on forward past Lando and almost past Max. Like, he got close, but ended up having to fall back and stay in second. Also during the start, Oscar went up to fifth out of sixth. So, and then the whole race, sort of the only interesting thing, well, actually, I'll talk about the only interesting thing, but a couple of other things before I get there, was Carlos DNF'd. He had an incredible overtake on someone. Ollie? I think it might have been Ollie. On pass, it was a beautiful, beautiful move. And then he attempted the same thing on Kimi. Kimi reacted a bit stronger than he was expecting, which caused Carlos to try to brake really aggressively, but then he lost control of the car and crashed and DNF'd. Carlos did take blame for it, although within his blame, he was like, I didn't expect Kimi to react like that. What were you expecting Kimi to do? Just like let you fly by? It wasn't like Kimi's fault, obviously. It was Carlos's fault in a way. Like, he shouldn't have probably attempted that move in that place. However, he did. But what really caused him to DNF was losing the car towards trying to save himself from crashing into Kimi. So that was a bit sad. And then another big thing that happened was that way in the back, Franco and Pierre, I think it was 17th and 18th. Was that right? Yeah. No. Yeah, I think it was 17th and 18th. Was Pierre and Franco. And Franco gets told on the radio to hold position and not to fight. And and then Franco literally went, what? Why? I am literally so much faster than him. And the commentators were like, yes, a great place to enact team orders, 17th and 18th. And Franco did not listen anyway and overtook Pierre. And he was indeed significantly faster. I think he was like 10 laps on his laps were like 10 laps. His tires were like 10 laps fresher. So it was like actually dumb for them to say that. And should he have done that? Probably not. Because like I know he's trying to impress people for next year since he doesn't have a spot, but at the same time, ignoring the people he's trying to impress and doing what he wants. Is that the best way to impress them? Not sure. But he did it. I'm glad he did it. And in fact, everyone's like, this is what McLaren should be doing the whole time. Because, like, it's 17th and 18th. Like, let's all relax. And Pierre was so much slower. Franco literally zoomed off. Did he overtake anyone else? No, but he did zoom off. So there was also that. But then, like, the biggest thing, I think, that we need to talk about is, well, really the most dramatic thing that happened all race was the battle between Charles and Lando. So Charles obviously overtook Lando into second. In the first lap, and then Lando basically spent the entire rest of the race trying to get that position back. So when he overtook him in lap 1, it took Lando until lap 21 to overtake Charles back. It took him that long, and he had multiple attempted overtakes on Charles, and Charles just kept defending beautifully. And one of the things that the commentators were saying was that Lando keeps attempting very obvious attempts, and that's not discrediting Charles's incredible defense. Like, he was defending like a beast. But also, this is another like callback to the fact that Lando doesn't really learn and grow and evolve in his ability to drive. He should not be making moves that Charles can anticipate, and he also should be adapting. If he knows Charles is knowing what his next move is, he should be able to do something else because he's in a significantly faster car than Charles. So he overtakes Charles in lap 21. He's ahead in second, and then after a whole bunch of pit stops, Charles eventually ends up back in second. So this is like somewhere in like lap 34 where Lando's back in the position of trying to overtake Charles. And he finally manages it in lap 51. So each time it took him over 20 laps to overtake in a faster car. Charles it was a masterclass in defense. Like, the way he kept positioning his car in the exact right place, and we were watching his car and his tires deteriorate in real time. Like, he was really struggling. Lando should have overtaken him so much sooner. It's almost insane how much it was kind of ridiculous. Like, and each overtake that he had, the 2 overtakes he ended up having on Charles, were great overtakes. It just took so long. Why did it take him so long to make that move? It wasn't a hard move. Which, again, is not discrediting Charles. Charles's defense was 10-10 regardless of Lando. And yes, Lando's battling someone who's really good at defending. Yes, it's a bit more of a challenge, but 21 laps each time is a crazy number. This is where, like, we'll come back to it. Well, actually, no, we'll say it now. Like, I don't know what this means for McLaren, because we're at a point, well, no, we'll talk about it in a minute. So, post-race, Max won, and he, as a commentator said, the dream of Title V is still alive. He's just doing incredible work. And let's not forget, he also won in a different racing category that he's never raced in before, while trying to, like, catch up in this championship. Like, bro is good. And it's not because he met Michael Schumacher when he was 4. It's just not. Oscar continues to lead, but he's only ahead of Lando now by 14 points. And Max is only behind Oscar by 40 points, which is crazy. Red Bull ended up getting fined 50,000 euros, but they've only had to pay half of it, so 25,000 euros, because they took some tape off that was, like, indicating to Lando where to park in his grid box, and they did this during the formation lap. And from what I understand, the repercussions are for doing it during the formation lap, which, like, teams are not allowed back on the grid during the formation lap, which is what I think they were actually breaching. It doesn't sound like McLaren was supposed to have that tape there anyway. And apparently they've done it before, so it's just, like, a whole bunch of mind games. Like, I don't think it was illegal to take off the tape. It's just when they took off the tape. But of course now everyone's, like, latching on that, and, like, of course Red Bull's cheating. I don't think they were cheating. I think they're just playing mind games. They just made a mistake in when they were taking it off, because I don't think this is the first time they've done it. And I also don't think McLaren is supposed to be doing that. But anyway, Carlos was also issued a 5 grid place penalty for Mexico because of his incident with Kimi. Also, this was really funny. In the post-race interview, Lando was asked what would have happened if he kept P2 position at the start and didn't let Charles overtake him. And Lando goes, Max, what was that thing you said earlier this year? Like, if my mom had balls. And then Max goes, she'd be my dad. It was so funny. Also, 10 out of 10 quote for Max. It was so funny when he said that. And then Lando quoting him now, Max being so happy to be quoted. It's great. Also, during the quali post-race conference, there was a clip of, it was obviously them 3, also, and there's a clip where Lando's being asked a question, and then you can see Charles lean over to Max to ask something, and Max literally full body turns to Charles to listen to him, tucks his foot under his, like, butt, like, just, like, fully attentive, like, I'm all yours. Like, and I just love their friendship, and I love how much Max loves Charles, and I just love their friendship. And I also really respect that Max continues to be friends with Lando, even though Lando is continuously shitting on him in the media. Continuously. And Max is just taking the high road, not reacting. He made no comments about the George news this week. Like, he's just, like, having a great time, and he doesn't give a fuck. But, like, let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is McLaren. The thing is, with Max 40 points behind them, and only 14 points in between Lando and Oscar, McLaren is way overdue for choosing a driver to back for the World Championship. However, they've now put themselves in a predicament where, like, who the hell do they choose? They, in theory, should choose Oscar, because Oscar is leading the championship. However, at the moment, probably due to lack of support from the team, Oscar is underperforming, and Lando's performing better out of 2, which would mean they should back Lando. But, like, Oscar is leading the championship. But, like, Lando's doing better right now. So who do they back? No one. They're going to continue to back no one, and they're going to continue to, like, just hand the championship into the palm of Max Verstappen, because, like, they're battling each other while Max zooms on ahead into first every time. Like, the current situation we're in with Max only 40 points away from the lead was such like a dream scenario just like a month and a half ago. Like, it was just like, imagine if Max, blah, 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 and everyone laughed. No, we're here right now. And McLaren still hasn't stepped up. And like, at this point, I don't think anyone wants McLaren to win the championship. No one used to want Max to win the championship, but at this point, I think most people are rooting for Max other than McLaren. But really, I think McLaren needs to learn a lesson. Not Oscar, not Lando, McLaren. McLaren has put themselves in this situation. McLaren has created a scenario where Max can swoop in and potentially steal a championship from their drivers, which is crazy. It is crazy. The fact that they were letting them race now because they've officially won the Constructors' Championship, they had that in the bag weeks ago. Weeks before the summer break, we knew that they were winning the Constructors' Championship. So there was absolutely no reason for them to drag this on for so long. And I know there's probably something with Mark Webber and Oscar about having a number one driver, which is why they're not officially choosing it. In my personal opinion, they think Lando's the number one driver. For Zach Brown, Lando is the number one driver. I think he had made a comment a year ago, or I think maybe it was before Oscar joined, that we were in the Lando era. And I also think that he wasn't expecting Oscar to be Oscar. I think Oscar is very good. He's had a poor second half of the season. So, and then, I don't know, Lando's just so inconsistent, and Lando is just so like, but Lando's a number one. To me, I think Lando is the Charles of McLaren, that they will never let him go. And he is their priority. And I just don't know what they're going to do, but they have to do something because they are losing this championship. And they continue the way they are, they will continue to lose the championship. There shouldn't be any repercussions. There should be no papaya rules. There should be nothing. Like, stop interfering because you're making this worse. And also support your drivers equally, because I feel like they're not being supported equally emotionally, I suppose. Like, I just feel like I feel like they're favoring Lando, but at the same time, I feel like they're not favoring Lando because they're not creating a good environment for either driver. I feel like this is not a good situation for anyone. Like, for example, at Mercedes, when Lewis was the number one driver, it was a shit time for Valtteri Bottas, but it wasn't a shit time for Lewis and Valtteri Bottas. It was just a shit time for Valtteri. Here, it's kind of a shit time for both of them. Because even when they make decisions that favor one over the other both end up suffering. So anyway, it's all just dumb. They're feeding right into Red Bull's hands. Like, Max is going to win at this point, and I think he should win. I don't think McLaren deserves to win. I think the drivers individually might deserve to win, but like, their team has fucked it up for them to such an extent that like, I don't know if I even want to see it happen. But I also don't want to see their mental state suffer that much. If Lando loses for the second year in a row, that's going to be rough. If Oscar loses his first world championship after leading so intensely for more than half of the season, that's going to be a rough transition for next year. So I don't know what McLaren needs to do, but they need to do something, and it has to be different than what they've done so far. The driver of the day was Charles, and I don't think there was anyone more deserving of that title than Charles. He was so great. My favorite part about all of this is that Ferrari has absolutely no clue how it happened. Every time they're like, so what'd you do with the car that's different? They're like, I don't know. And they're like, so what are you going to do when you get back to the factory? Figure out why we're fast. Like, they're just like baffled, like, what is happening? Why like, Lewis was also pretty close. I think he had a puncture towards the end, so he was told to save and to drive like more reservedly. But like, overall, they were both relatively fast, and Charles was very close to keeping second. Like, just a couple more laps and he would have finished second. And they don't know why. And it's so funny because like, they're all trying to bullshit, but Charles can't bullshit. And Charles is like, I don't know. we're just fast. I couldn't tell you. Which I find hilarious. And I just don't think anyone is more deserving of that spot than him. And the dick in the box is, you guessed it, McLaren. They are just permanently dick in the box until someone proves me otherwise, and I don't think anyone behaved egregiously enough to take that coveted spot away from McLaren. They suck. They're doing so bad. It's just terrible management. I think Carlos said in an interview that like the team has to manage their two drivers, especially when they're in this position, which is probably true, but they're not doing a good job of it. They really need to rally and figure something out because they're doing a terrible job of managing their drivers. Really bad. All right, so the results of this race were Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Charles Lewis, Oscar Piastri, George, Yuki, Nico, Ollie, Fernando, Liam, Lance, Kimi, Alex, Esteban, Isaac, Franco, Gabby, Pierre, and then Carlos DNF'd. The Drivers' Championship standings are as follows. Oscar Piastri with 346 points, Lando Norris with 332 points, Max Verstappen with 306 points. As we mentioned a couple of times, that leaves Max only 40 points away from Oscar, and Lando's only 14 points away from Oscar. Max is 28 points away from Lando, so that's a win and a bit. Away from overtaking Lando in the championship. Following Max is, I've also put Max, George with 252, Charles with 192, Lewis with 142, Kimi with 89, Alex with 73, Nico with 41, and Isaac with 39. Carlos with 38, Fernando with 37, Lance with 32, Liam with 30, Esteban with 28, Yuki with 28, Pierre with 20, Ollie 20, Gabby 18, and Franco 0. So everyone's extremely close to each other except for Franco. Poor Franco. So everywhere else it's also pretty tight. However, it's just not as important as figuring out who's going to win the Drivers' Championship. The Constructors' Championship is as follows. McLaren's obviously already won with 678, followed by Mercedes with 341, Ferrari with 334, Red Bull with 331. So that's really tight between Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull. So really anything's up to play. And after that, it's Williams with 111. So that's like a 200-point drop. Then Racing Bulls with 72, Aston with 69, Kick Sauber with 59, Haas with 48, and Alpine with 20. And that concludes the Austin Grand Prix. Next week is Mexico City, and Mexico City is a really, really fun race. I'm very excited for it. I'm very excited for the food, and I'm very excited to see because I think this is going to be a huge one. Well, I don't think. I'm saying like a really obvious thing. It's going to be huge for the Drivers' Championship, and I can't wait. I can't wait to see what happens. I can't wait to see. I'm not going to jinx it. My wishes for next week is for Oscar to rally, enter his villain era, whatever he needs to do to get his shit together and perform. Like, enough's enough. We can't have any more Bakus and Austins. Not that Austin was as bad as Baku, but still. We need McLaren to back the fuck off. And we need Max to continue winning. And I can't wait to see what next week holds. So, until next week, see you soon. Box.